security skill, as some people tend to think, but it's really a life skill. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce myself because a lot of you don't know who I am. As Danielle mentioned, I am the Community Security Director out of the Federation. My position came as a partnership a little over a year ago between the Federation and Secure Community Network, which is a national organization that tries to set up security programs for Jewish communities throughout the country. My experience, as Danielle mentioned, I have about 20 years of security industry experience. But on top of that, I was a detective in the NYPD before I took this position in Florida. And my time there was spent not just on patrol, but I did field intelligence. I was in the counterterrorism division where I conducted infrastructure protection and intelligence analysis. And then before I left, I was in special victims where I was conducting investigations on child abuse and sexual assault related crimes. During my time there, I worked directly for the chief of special victims, who was also in charge of hate crimes. And I wound up working on numerous investigations with him because he was a very hands-on person when it came to these types of crimes. And he often called me out to work it with him. And so it was a very interesting experience and it brought me here. So if anyone has questions about that, please always feel free to contact me also. So let's get started. Objectives. This, like I said, is a life skill. This is not just a security skill. Situational awareness is something that you can use at any moment in your life, whether you're driving, you're going to work, you're at school, you're at home, you're picking your children up from school, anything like that. That's where situational awareness comes into play. And there's a big difference between a good situational awareness and bad situational awareness. And we're going to have a discussion today about what that means. And after this, you'll be able to, I'm not going to read all of these off to you. I think the most important part of all of these objectives in the end is that you're able to commit to action, that lower right-hand box there. We don't want someone to say in the end, well, that seemed kind of weird. That's a little suspicious. Maybe I should have done something about that. Maybe I should have called someone and let someone know. We don't want that to happen. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that you're going to get from this training. It's that if there is something suspicious, if something raises your, the little hairs on the back of your neck or your spidey sense goes off or anything like that, right? You want to be able to say that I did something and not come back later and regret that you didn't do something. And a great example of this actually just happened recently where some children were getting off the bus and there was an individual, it's not a gated community, it was an open community in Boca, and an individual was in a car, a single male who was sitting there in his car as the children were getting off the bus. And no child got into his car. And there was a mother there picking up her children, and there were a couple of girls that were supposed to walk home alone. She decided to grab those children and say, come with me. She just didn't like the feeling of this individual. He then drove off, looked in the mailbox of a house, and then drove off a little more and sat on a corner, doing nothing in a cul-de-sac, just sat there. And the mother was watching and called the mother of those other girls and said, you might want to come pick your girls up there at my house because of this strange, suspicious vehicle and this man. And that mother's driving down the street as the vehicle starts moving up the street and they see each other. And she stops and says, can I help you? Because he acted like he was lost. And he said, no, I'm just leaving. And she said, yes, you are. And right there, because of the awareness of what was going on, and that is a very suspicious action that happened, right? But because of that awareness, we might have just saved some children from a predator. And what did they do? They wound up telling someone that immediately called the police. And the next day, the sheriff's office was there with a car on the corner and able to take a look. They got the license plate of the vehicle. They got a description of the man and a picture of the car. And that's great. That's great situational awareness right there. That's what we're talking about. So it's not just a matter of you're at work and something's going on or anything like that. This could be any part of your day. Situational awareness comes into play. And committing to action is probably the most important thing you can do. So let's start discussing the basics of situational awareness. There are three topics we're going to bring up here. It's going to be people, activities, and vehicles. What is really, what are we talking about when we say something is suspicious or that we want to be aware of? Well, Sometimes you'll see these, and these are real scenarios that we've come across, right? Someone is watching a building, someone is watching you or your children, like I just mentioned, right? Someone having some sort of weird behavior in an unusual, in a place that they shouldn't. A lot of people are very aware of that, and they want to make sure that nothing is, that nothing's wrong with that person. Activities. Sometimes we see activities where people are taking unusual notes. We saw this in New York. I trained people on this. If someone was walking along a building, measuring between the columns of the building, especially if it's a sensitive location. If someone's tampering with any type of security equipment, trying to commit a crime, or even at a gas station, we want to make sure that we are aware of what's happening around us. And I'm going to get into that gas station scenario a little later, because there's some great examples of some activities that occur at gas stations that we don't even realize are happening. And we need to be aware when we are just simply putting gas in our car. And potential risk situations for a vehicle, it's pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. You might have an unknown vehicle repeatedly going across, past your house, past your place of work, your house of worship, whatever it is. You might see a vehicle following you, and there's we used to use a video that showed a woman that looked at a Crime Stopper report where it was discussing a vehicle. It described a vehicle that had erratic driving and someone that the police were looking for. And she saw the vehicle, she took a picture of it and started making a phone call. Then she started driving away, and that vehicle was following her. She was aware enough that the vehicle was following her, and as she was going home, she didn't want to go into her driveway. Instead, she pulled out and tried to go somewhere else, but the person was so aggressive that he blocked her at that point. But the fact that she was aware of it and on the phone with the police at that time, telling them where she is, that was really important and could have saved her, maybe not her life, but definitely from some sort of injury or further interaction with this very aggressive individual. So what is situational awareness? You're going to see two definitions here. One is very clinical sounding, and the other one is really what it means, right? Always being aware of what's occurring around you. And that's basically what we want to get across today, is that just know what's happening. Don't have your, don't make it where your head is buried into something and you're not aware of what's happening. Don't make it where you're covering up your senses and they're taken out of play in your daily life. So why is it important? So you might want to say, if you're always aware and of everything that's going around you, doesn't that make you a little paranoid, right? But we don't want you to feel that way. It's not that you're paranoid. There are certain things that having a certain level of awareness will really help you with. First, it helps you recognize safety and security dangers. And why do we need that? This is key to a lot of things. Just being able to recognize when something might be wrong is something that parents, it's part of good parenting when you're dealing with your children. It's something teachers see. It's something supervisors see in the workplace. Just recognizing that there is something going on that makes you say, "Ooh, that's out of the ordinary." Then it guides your response. So bad things happen. It could be a flood, it could be a fire, it could be a crime. But there are visual cues that occur that let us know what that event is and then how we want to take action for that. So it definitely understanding that recognizing the safety and then understanding it quickly enough guides your response. And then we get into that faster reaction time. Once you're aware of something, you can react to it. Remember that commit to action part that I was talking about. Once you know that there's something going on, you are able to react to it faster than someone who doesn't know or isn't aware, and that improves your chance of survival. And by survival, I mean something as bad as you're just not getting injured. Think about it. We want to, when we're driving a car on the highway, we might look for red brake lights a quarter of a mile down the road as opposed to right in front of us. Why? Because we want to be aware of what's happening so that we can react when we need to. So what's the difference between poor situational awareness and good situational awareness? So this is, you see these pictures, right? That's what it is. Poor situational awareness is that it was that individual that had his headphones on, his head's buried in his phone. His focus is completely diverted on something else. He's not paying attention to anything going on around him. Good situational awareness is being observant, knowing your surroundings, right? You're able to focus, and by focusing, you can react. But what impacts our situational awareness? What impacts our ability to be aware? Our emotions, our state of mind. Because it's a state of mind of being aware, so our emotions impact that. And it definitely it definitely makes it harder, depending on what you're feeling at the moment, what you're going through, to be more aware of everything around you. There are 5 levels of situational awareness that we'll get into a little bit, right? The first is tuned out, where an elephant can walk by you and you're not even going to realize. The next is relaxed, and relaxed is, you know what's going on, kind of. You're paying attention to a couple of things. You're sort of reacting to some things, but you're very relaxed in your environment. Focused is where you see everything happening around you, and you're making an actual conscious determination of what's happening around you. Then you have high alert. That's when something could be a little wrong and you're paying very close attention. And paralysis is when you're overburdened with all the senses that are happening around you and you just can't react to anything. We never want to get to paralysis. It's a horrible place to be in. We also don't want to be in tuned out. Having somewhere between focused and high alert on a regular basis, focused is a great place to be. It's not the easiest to be in, but it's a great place to be. So let's take driving as an example. Tuned out is listening to the radio, not paying attention. You drove to work and you don't even remember making all those turns and driving. You just did it, right? It was just almost an unconscious act of driving to work, and you don't even remember whether or not you stopped at that stop sign, what was going on there, where was that red light. You don't remember it at all. Relaxed awareness is you're out for a drive and you're attending to traffic patterns. You're consciously paying attention to everything happening around you. You remember those red lights, you've seen them, you stopped at them, and you're paying attention to everyone that's driving around you. Next, we have focused awareness. That's when there's a rainy condition, you know something's happening, so you're paying a little extra attention to what's happening, and you're not tuned out, right? You're tuned into everything happening. High alert is those brake lights. All of a sudden, you're paying 100% attention because it's a slippery road. You saw brake lights, you don't want to slip either. You don't want to slide anywhere. And so you're 100% paying attention to what's happening around you, to the side of you. You notice the guy next to you, how he's driving. He's weaving in and out of lanes possibly. Then finally, we have paralysis. Paralysis is that death grip. That's what winds up happening. You're frozen. Something's happening, and all of a sudden, you can't do anything to stop it. And we never want to be in that situation. We always want to pay attention to what's happening around us in that focus area, but we want to be able to act. So we don't want to be overly aware, where we're so aware of everything that we're not really paying attention anymore, because we're paying too much attention to the point where, and I know that seems weird that we're paying too much attention, but you're paying too much attention to the point where you know there's dangerous situations happening and you can't act on them. You can't react to those situations, and you wind up, unfortunately, possibly getting into a car crash like this. So what is it? How do we become aware? What is it that we do with this awareness, and how do we train ourselves? Well, everything we see around us comes from our senses, right? We have sight and sound, and it's interpreted in numerous ways. We interpret it based on our emotions, based on our perceptions, our biases, our personal history, our experiences, right? That's how we perceive things. How do we overcome all that? That's overcome with training. All of these other things are very innate to us, and they're part of our daily lives. But with training, we can overcome all of these other aspects, hopefully, with enough training. So when we process our bias, which is what I just mentioned there, we have certain biases. There are things that happen to us, right? They're processed through personal experience. They're processed through race, culture, and religion, knowledge, and training. So knowledge and training is how we overcome those biases. And I want to make that very clear. And the reason I'm talking about this, I'm not going to get into it too much, is because suspicious activity and understanding and situational awareness is about behavior and activity. It has nothing to do with appearance or stereotypes. So we have to take all those other unconscious and subconscious aspects of our life and throw them out, and hopefully with good knowledge and training. Now, police departments went through this. It was a big topic in the past couple of years. And police departments went through this in order to stop profiling. So the best way to do that was to go through training. Officers had to go through training in order to understand these biases that we have as people and overcome them. And so the same thing happens here. We want to everyone to understand that situational awareness, good situational awareness, is very much about behavior and activity and has nothing to do with appearance or stereotype. So here is an example. This is a short clip. I don't know if anyone watches the Netflix show. It's an Israeli show called Fauda. And here's a short clip from Fauda where you can see unconscious bias and normalcy bias taking place. So one other quick introduction to this before I let it continue. For those who haven't seen this, the clip is taking place at a border crossing between certain territories. There's a young male in a vehicle, and then you'll see another young male in walking along the checkpoint. They are dressed as the typical appearance of Jewish settlers that are coming across a checkpoint. However, they are actually Hamas terrorists in the show who dressed as these Jewish settlers in order to conduct an attack. And they're at a checkpoint. So let's take a look at what the soldiers at the checkpoint are doing. So that is one of those individuals who dressed as a Jewish settler to cross the border. You see soldier looking at some grandmother in her car, in her packages. He's doing what he feels he needs to. There's the other Hamas operative who's coming across, walking across. You see there are soldiers up in the tower. He's obviously nervous, but the soldiers aren't paying attention. Here we have another soldier questioning an old man, but lets the guy that looks like the settler just come right by, doesn't even question he's there. Why? Because in the minds of these soldiers, this is a great example where we're saying this could never happen. They would never have a terrorist dressed like this and come across. He must be a good guy. He must be someone that we can trust. So I'm not even going to question him. I'm just going to nod my head and let him come across. I'm not going to pay attention to his mannerisms or anything like that. So this is definitely a bias that we want to not have, right? This is something that we want to say, don't do this, because anything can happen and any situation can occur. And therefore, we need to be on top of our game and not just say, this could never happen, because it can happen. And it's exactly what happened in this clip. So we're going to discuss a little bit about what you should observe in a suspicious situation. We're going to talk about things that occur as far as people, activity, vehicles, and a little bit about cyber. Not too much on cyber, but we're talking about situations and what should recall. And the reason I'm talking about recall is because eventually you're going to call the police, we hope, especially if something is really bothering you and it's very suspicious. Not everyone knows, and I know this from personal experience, not everyone pays attention to the things they need to in order to describe a person, a vehicle, or the activity that's occurring. And a lot of times that's because they don't know what to pay attention to. It's no one's fault. It's not the fault of John Q. Public. It's really that they don't know. So discussing it and having an idea and being trained on that will definitely help you, not only when you're paying attention to it, but your recall of it, hopefully, when you're discussing it with the police. So here are the practice categories we're going to be discussing: people, activity, and vehicles. So how do we describe people, especially when we're going to talk to law enforcement and we need to describe the person themselves, right? So that law enforcement or whoever, or security or whoever it is that needs to look for the person is able to find the right person. So yes, gender. Now, it's not the time, unfortunately, to be politically correct when it comes to gender, because if we're talking about an emergency situation, chances are the police officer is going to react to, is it a male or a female? That's what it's going to be. Okay, so at this point, until things change in the world or anything like that, that is what gender is going to be when you're discussing this and it's an emergency situation and you need police to come and look for someone. Same thing with race. It's a description of a person: age, height, weight, the weapon. Now, age, give old or young. If you have an age range, that's great. It's not always easy to do. Height, a lot of people can't estimate, but there are tools you can use. If you know how tall a lamppost is, if you know how tall a car is, and the person is standing next to a vehicle, then you have an idea of what the person's height could be. Weight, if you need to say heavy set or slim or whatever, that's fine. Weapon, is it a knife? Is it a gun? Is it a big gun, a long gun, or is it a small gun, right? Is it a baseball bat? What's the color of the baseball bat? Was it a metal bat or a wooden bat, if you can remember? And then go down from top to bottom: hat or hair color, type of clothing. Was it a jacket? Was it a shirt? Was it a button-down shirt? Was it a polo shirt? Shoes? and any type of distinguishing features. And I know that's not easy to remember. I'll give you another example of distinguishing features, especially if you're involved in the situation, because you're going through a traumatic event at that moment. When I was in Special Victims, we had a case where a woman was attacked, a victim survivor was attacked, and she remembered everything about the guy's face. It was amazing. We had her with a sketch artist. She had all the little details of his face. It was unbelievable, considering she went through such a traumatic event. When we found who the guy was, and it was a perfect match with mugshots from previous years, and even the DNA matched and everything. Whenever she was asked, "Do you remember anything distinguishing features, marks, tattoos, anything like that?" She couldn't remember. Turned out the guy had a big New York Yankees logo tattooed on his cheek, and he had it the whole time. But she couldn't recall that because of the traumatic event she was going through. So again, hopefully no one here is ever going to have to go through such a traumatic event, and that your brain will be able to recall all of these things. But a lot of times it comes with training. If you look at Special Forces guys, they get so much training in these things. They recall a lot of things as they're in the middle of certain battles. So obviously I don't expect you to be able to do that, but this type of training is the first step in trying to have that ability to recall certain details during an event. Same thing with vehicles. There are certain things we want to know. The police don't need to know, that it's a 3.5 liter Hemi engine in it and that type of, don't worry about any of that, right? If you can make out the make and model, that's great. But if you get, it's a van, a truck, or a car, it's a 4-door, 2-door, the color is great. License plates are amazing. If you can get a license plate, and I'll come to an example of that soon, how that really helped in a live situation, that would be extremely helpful. Sometimes, even if you just get the first few digits or alphas of the license plate, that's extremely helpful if you can get the type of vehicle it is as well. How many occupants and the direction they went? Are there any signs on it? Any stickers, bumper stickers that police can see? Does it have a broken window? Because that's something easily noticed when police are driving by. So keep that in mind. And then certain activities that we might see. The easiest way to do this is break this down like we did in school when you're writing an essay, right? So it's the what, when, where, why, and obviously who was involved in all of this. And that's what they're going to put in the report. And that's what we want to try to remember when we're seeing something. And also the direction. Where did they go? Right? Because that's going to help the police. Now, that's a part of situational awareness that some people don't always adhere to, and they don't always get. Direction is really important. Do you know when you're on a certain street, when you're on, and it's a little easier where we are, but when you're on 95th South and Glades, do you know which direction is east, west, north, and south? Keep that in mind, because if you see something happening and you want to tell the police and you're on the call of 911 and you say he drove eastbound on Glades Road, but when he actually went west, well, the police are now going in the wrong direction. So that's precious minutes. So we really want to try to know our directions. It's great now, especially if you're in a vehicle, because most of us have cars where there's a compass on it and it tells you which direction everything is in. So let's take a quick look at a video. It's a short video where we're going to learn to recall some details and why it's important. And this is a video of things happening. So let's see what, normally I would ask what you can recall, but let's just go through this video real quick, and we'll look at what we want to recall based on the video. Okay, for the sake of time, we're not going to pause the video, but I want you to think to yourself, what exactly did you see? What can you recall from that picture? You can't see the license plate, but you can see it is a yellow and black license plate. That's New York. We saw it was a Land Rover. We know the color of the car, which is great. Did we see all of this? Could we recall all of this? What would we say about this individual? Right? These are the things we want to start remembering. These are the things we want to pay attention to. The fact that he had a very heavy chain, as far as jewelry around his neck. He's wearing, he's holding a baseball bat. He has this coral colored shorts on him, right? He's a bald man. So these are all things that we want to start looking at. Now, shoes are really important. And one of the reasons shoes are very important is because someone conducting something suspicious that then goes and wants to change their clothing. For a lot of people, it was really interesting. This was actually an anecdote from FBI agents who were looking at at spies during the Cold War, and they were following people throughout throughout the U.S. It was the shoes that the spies could not change. Right? They could have a backpack and they're changing their jackets. They're putting on a baseball cap, taking off a baseball cap, putting on a wig, changing their shirts, whatever it was. But the shoes were the hardest things to change. And so if you pay attention to shoes, sometimes that's a really good indication. And it's a great detail to give the police. So why were license plates so important? I told you I would give you this as an example. In 2019, during Hanukkah, there was an individual that went with a machete to a rabbi's house in Muncie and the synagogue next door and attacked people. There was one individual with the wherewithal to get the license plate of the car when the guy drove off. And at that moment, when the police had the license plate, they put it into a system with license plate readers. When the individual crossed the George Washington Bridge into New York City, it was immediately notified, the NYPD was immediately notified, and the local precinct was able to stop him. And that's one of the reasons getting a license plate can be extremely helpful in certain situations. So as I've mentioned before, awareness affects every part of our lives. And so we're going to get into a little bit of all those different parts. So let's start about work and worship. In May 2010, there was a bombing attempt in New York City at Times Square. It was because 3 individuals who were vendors on the street. One of them happened to be, was probably a veteran, because if I remember my codes correctly for New York City, in that area to be a street vendor, there's veteran preference, and you have to be a veteran in order to get a license for that. But these 3 individuals saw something in their workspace, because the street is their workspace, and they saw something that didn't make sense. They saw the guy stop the car, they saw him put on the hazard lights, and he ran off. He just ran. And these individuals had the wherewithal and the awareness to say, that's not right. There's something wrong with that. And they contacted a police officer in the area, who then was able to take a look at the car, and that saved hundreds, maybe even thousands of lives. Now, yes, it's true, the device itself had its own sort of issues with going off, but the way buildings are set up there, if the device had gone off before the bomb squad got there to defuse it, with all the glass and all the shattering and what we call reflective pressure, the blast itself would have injured hundreds, if not thousands of people. So what should we be aware of when we're at buildings? This is just, well, here's something to be aware of. Your home, your place of work, the school your children go to, guess what? It's all on Google Maps, and we can all get a satellite view. So keep that in mind, right? And if we can do it, anyone can do it. So some of the things we want to pay attention to is avenues of approach. How did someone get into the building? If we're walking into our building, our place of work, can other people get in there? How can they get in there? Is there an open parking lot for them to be in? Is there a place for them to escape to if they were to do something at our work? Can they get in only by foot? Is it possible to drive really close to the building? Are there places where they can hide? So make note of these things and pay attention to natural concealments also at your location of work, so that people should be hiding there. And that comes to our next thing, where they can observe what you're doing. Observation is really important. Know where people can sit and observe what's going on in your life, what's going on in the life of your coworkers, of your children, what's happening at your place of work, your house of worship, wherever that is, right? Even your gym. But if people are watching, they want to know something. Unfortunately, bad activities, bad events can happen anywhere. And so that's why we need to be aware and just, I don't want to tell you to put your head on a swivel, but at the same time, know these key spots. If you see someone there, know that that's a little suspicious. So here are some examples of what bad guys did, and then what we do as a result of that. And I'll just put them all up there so you can start reading, but I'll discuss some of them as well. Repeatedly drove past target location to make firsthand observations. This was actually a white supremacist who was conducting pre-operational surveillance at a synagogue. So we want to be aware of vehicles and parking lots. He never stopped into the synagogue, but we want to be aware of all of that. Who's doing what? Same thing with our place of work. Used a nearby coffee shop as cover while they conducted surveillance on targets. This was an Al-Qaeda surveillance specialist. He actually sat in New York City at a coffee shop with a view of the financial district and of Jewish locations in New York City. He would sit in a coffee shop and just watch what was going on, so he can tell what he needed to do and his best way of having another operative conduct an attack. These other examples are really interesting. The last one in particular, obtained the job at a targeted facility to observe operations from the inside. This is something we saw recently as well in some chat rooms. It's important that your HR, and I know you have good HR people, that you vet your employees and you vet the people coming in to your buildings, that you understand who they are. You have a discussion with them. And the reason is because why are they there? They could be there just to conduct surveillance on your buildings. Like in this case, there was someone who got a job on a construction site for a synagogue, and he was then able to sketch out floor plans of the whole synagogue, and the purpose was to conduct an attack there. Also, called to facilitate the questions. There was someone, a white supremacist, that called the synagogue and said, "When are your services on Friday night?" And the receptionist just said, "Yeah, they're at 7 p.m. Why did he do that? He did that so that he can get the most people in there when he wanted to conduct his attack. And that's kind of scary. But that goes to receptionists at any place of work also. If someone's calling and just asking blank questions like that, maybe have a conversation. "Well, sir, is there someone in particular you'd like to speak with? Is there a service you would like? How did you hear about us?" Right? Is there a better time of day for you? Just different things that you can start asking people over the phone or when they walk in, so that you understand the real reason they're there and why they're asking questions to begin with. So elevated risk areas. I told you we were going to discuss gas stations, because this is something we all do. Unfortunately, they're not always the safest place. So as you see here, this thief is called a slider, if you see on the right side of the screen. So these are individuals that when you're pumping gas, I don't know how many of us really lock our cars, but I know that we're paying attention to that little television screen sometimes, and we're pumping gas and we didn't lock our cars, and people drive up next to you and they slide out of their car, open yours, and start stealing things out of it. They can steal your car completely also. That's happened as well, especially if you leave your keys in the car, which is easy to do these days, especially when you have the push button starts, right? Unless you keep your key in your pocket, that can easily happen. Also, if your key's in your pocket, make sure that when you're locking your doors, that the other side stays locked also, and that you're not too close to your car, that it could impact or open the door on the other side. So here's a closer look at what happens. Now, you can read this in Buckhead in 2019, July 2019. It was really interesting. This was in Georgia. There were 52 incidents. There was $91,000 in cash, phones, and other equipment taken, including firearms. 106 firearms taken because of this type of incident alone. Just someone coming up to the car next to them at a gas station and opening doors and taking things out of cars. And yes, there are surveillance cameras, but no one's paying attention to them. So please, you must be aware. So how can you be aware? So this is kind of like the wheel of awareness when it comes to gas stations. Scan for people, look for vehicles that are just sitting there doing nothing. Now, and I don't mean sitting there at a gas pump and no one's in it. I mean sitting there and someone's in there and they're doing nothing, or they're to the side. Check for license plates just in case. Assess anyone coming close to you. And if someone comes by, you go over this to number 8 there, address them, nod your head, say hello, let them know that you see them. Let them know that you're aware that they are near you. Make sure you secure your credit card. Always make sure that it comes out of the machine, or that you put it in a safe place afterwards. Lock your doors. Try not to look at the little screen on the gas pumps, because that really takes your attention away from everything around you. Same thing if you're in a rural area going on a run. There are rural places and parks and whatnot that can be dangerous. Even in our community, there are locations you're alone, you're just going for a run. Maybe tell someone you're going. That's a great idea also, because a lot of times we want to go for runs. What are we doing? We're putting our earbuds in. We're going for a hike. We're going for a walk. We're listening to music. You know, we have our phone with us, but we're really not paying attention to everything around us. Do we know what direction we're running in if we're on a path somewhere? Do we know exactly where we are as we go further into that path? You know, do we know how to tell someone if we need to call for help, how to tell them our location? So also let someone know, say, I'm going for a run for about 30 minutes. This is how long it takes me to do that 2.5 miles. I'll give you a call when I'm done. If you don't hear from me, give me a call just in case. Same thing at cash machines, ATMs. So as you can see in these pictures, this woman is walking up to an ATM. There are two individuals that show up behind her. She's not paying attention to anyone, but there are people watching. Everything you do, there are people watching. Just remember that. And you need to remember that you have to be aware, look around, say hello to them. It's also not the best idea to use an outside ATM. And that has to do with some cyber issues as well. Always tug on the card reader to see if there's an overlay that someone put on there to read your credit card or your debit card. Same thing with the digits. Sometimes there are PIN cameras in there. You want to be aware of any type of these skimming devices and also the people around you. Do not go to ATMs that look like this. I haven't seen any in the Boca area, but coming from New York, I've seen plenty of them. This is just not a good idea. So safety at ATMs, similar to gas stations, here's our wheel of safety. Scan for people, scan for vehicles, look around your area, see what's going on. Don't have any distractions. Take those earbuds out so you can hear when people are walking past you. Look at the machine, tug on those areas, see if they're loose panels. Cover the keyboard when you are putting in your PIN, because there are people that put pinhole cameras in certain locations. And make sure that you end the transaction and that it's over. Another good option, go into the bank. Just go into the bank. Use the ATM in the bank. It's usually safer than using one outside. Elevated risks with crowds. So here we're worried about pickpockets. So this happens quite a bit, especially at some big events. Someone who's coming and asks you to, they appear like they need help and you want to help them because you're a good person. Someone bumps into you immediately. And that's definitely something that anyone who's grown up in New York knows. If you get bumped into in Times Square, first thing you're doing is checking for your wallet. All right. So just be aware of everyone around you. We used to have a video in this where you see the person, there are two women walking and they have a selfie stick and they're walking along and recording themselves, and two other women come up behind them and pull the wallet out of their bag, and one woman hands it off to the other and they walk off. And it's recorded from the selfie recording, but no one realized what was happening at the time. Now let's get into some internet safety and what you should be aware of. We won't get too much into this, but be aware of fake websites. Be aware of phishing emails that come up, because they do come up a lot. And there's been an uptick over the past couple of years with COVID. A lot of phishing emails, especially, they come from, they'll say it's coming from your boss. Hey, can you help me? I need a lot of help right now. I'm in the middle of a meeting. Go out and get some gift cards. Give me the numbers, or I need money transferred to this account. Do it immediately for me, please. So don't click on anything if you don't know where the email came from, where the message came from. A good thing to do is call that person and say, hey, did you just send me this email? It seems out of place, and double check with them, verify that the email came from them and that they want you to do exactly that. Because once you open up or click on something, you don't know what you're opening your computer to. And it could be a home computer. This isn't just for work. It could be a home computer. And you could invite some sort of virus or Trojan horse in there, where the person at the other end can read your keystrokes and turn on your camera without you knowing. And right there, they'll have access to a lot of things, including your bank accounts, because we're all banking online these days. So please be careful with that. If you are in a public place like Starbucks, be aware of shoulder surfing. Make sure that your screen is covered. Also, try to use a separate VPN so that you can block anything that's coming through, coming back at your computer. There could be other people at the Starbucks that are looking to get into your system through the fact that you are on an open Wi-Fi system, the same as them, and they can piggyback into your computer. You have the same vulnerabilities these days with your mobile devices, which are really just small computers fitting in the palm of your hand. So keep all of that in mind as well. Choose your passwords carefully. Make sure to protect them. Change them on a regular basis. Be aware of Wi-Fi hotspots in public locations. Social media is a big issue these days for a number of reasons. And just for anyone who's on social media, I'll also make a note right now, as far as situational awareness, be very aware of misinformation. There's a lot of stuff going on social media, especially when there's an event that occurs. And we can take Surfside as an example with the building collapse. there was a lot of misinformation going on very early in that incident. So just be aware of what you're reading and what you're putting back out there and how that can impact everyone that you're connected to. Awareness at home. Here you can see some things are just unusual and some things are actually criminal behavior. If there's someone in the backyard, your neighbor's backyard, and they're walking, that could be their friend, that could be them with a baseball hat on, right? You just don't know. But if they're trying to open a door or a window and they're covering their hand with their sleeve, that's probably not to leave fingerprints. So in the end, this is criminal, right? Let's make sure that we understand these things. There is a difference between unusual and criminal, but eventually things do become criminal. And at that point, you definitely want to call 911 and describe the person as best we can, as we spoke before. Keeping our homes safe. Okay, 360 degrees of awareness. This can happen with motion sensors on lights, video cameras, make sure our windows are locked. We can have $1 million security apparatus at our homes, at our place of work, anything like that. But if we're not utilizing it correctly, you might as well leave the front door open. So that's just something to keep in mind. We throw this in here just to remind everyone of what they need to do at home to stay safe. And also pay attention. If you see something out of place, review those video recordings. Take a look. Maybe someone was on your property for something. And you want to be able to take that and give that to the police as quickly as possible. It's okay, by the way, to call the police for something suspicious if it's not criminal. You don't have to call 911. You can, if you go to in our case, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, if you go to their website, there's a non-emergency number. Same thing with Boca PD or Delray PD. There are non-emergency numbers you can call just because you want to report something that seems out of place. Obviously, if it's an immediate concern, you're going to call 911. So here's situational awareness. Let's take a look at this video, how we recognize danger and what's happening. So as it says, we're going to go back to that video from before. And there's a little bit of some, well, I'm sorry, this is a different video. So here, take a look at what's happening here. This individual, he's a Hasidic male in Brooklyn who is about to get beat up by these 4 individuals. This is in Williamsburg, actually. So here's what's happening before. His head is down, it's in the phone, he's not paying attention. We have the attackers across the street, probably about, as it says, 300 feet away, but he doesn't see them. He's not aware of them. He's just walking along. Now, should he be allowed to walk along and not have to worry about this? 100%. We all should be allowed to. Unfortunately, that's not the world we're living in at the moment. And there are people that will take advantage of the fact that we are not paying attention to what is going on around us. Could he have done something if he was paying attention? Could he have ran in the other direction at that time? Well, they were far enough away. It is possible. So again, that is the bad situational awareness in play. Let's take a look at this video. I was told that this video, I believe, was in South Africa. And you'll see how good situational awareness possibly saved a life. This is a couple, they're driving home. There is a person driving the car on the other side of the car. The passenger is getting out right now. The dog is meeting her. And unfortunately, there are a lot of kidnappings that happen in that part of the world. So people are very aware. She sees someone getting out of the car, they're masked, they have a weapon. She immediately gets in and the driver reacts quickly enough to get away. This is good situational awareness. This is seeing what's happening around you, knowing something's wrong. And because she was aware, she was able to react quicker. Remember that slide towards the beginning of the presentation where we spoke about having that faster reaction time because you're aware of what's happening and how that can save you. In the end, this is the last bit we're going to talk about reporting things. Unusual behavior, you can call the police, you can call SCN's duty desk, take a photo. This is when it's not an emergency. If you see something suspicious, please call the police as quickly as you can. Observe what's happening. If you must take any type of action, again, there's the run, hide, fight, barricade to protect yourself. That's in a really dire situation. But for criminal behavior, call 911 immediately. And please let me know about it. I want to know what's happening in our community. This really quick, this is an example of people that did not call the police in time. And this happened in New York, and the 28-year-old woman was stabbed to death outside her apartment because no one wanted to do anything. There were bystanders that said, we're not going to do anything about this. So please commit to action. Say you're going to do something.